perhaps an hour of light left. I began to follow the ditch, not wanting to climb the steep rocky sides until I had to. The ravine curved away from the prison quite soon and looked as though it would lead down toward the river, presumably the runoff of melting snow carrying the prison's refuse away. I was nearly to the corner of the soaring wall when I heard a faint sound behind me. I whirled. The sound had been made by a rock falling from the lip of the ditch, dislodged by the foot of a large grey wolf. As an alternative to the items under the snow, I had certain desirable characteristics from a wolf's point of view. On the one hand, I was mobile, harder to catch, and posed the possibility of resistance. On the other, I was slow, clumsy, and above all, not frozen stiff, thus offering no danger of broken teeth. I also smelled of fresh blood, temptingly warm in this frozen waste. Were I a wolf, I thought, I wouldn't hesitate. The animal made up its mind at the same time I came to my own decision regarding our future relations. There had been a Yank at Pembroke Hospital, name of Charlie Marshall. He was a pleasant chap, friendly as all the Yanks were, and most entertaining on his pet subject. His pet subject was dogs. Charlie was a sergeant in the Canine Corps. He had been blown up, along with 2 of his dogs, by an anti-personnel mine outside a small village near Arles. He grieved for his dogs, and often told me stories about them when I would sit with him during the odd slack moments in my shift. More to the immediate point, he had also once told me what to do and not do should I ever be attacked by a dog. I felt it was stretching a point to call the eerie creature picking its delicate way down the rocks a dog, but hoped that it might yet share a few basic character traits with its tame descendants. "Bad dog," I said firmly, staring it in one yellow eyeball. "In fact," I said, backing very slowly toward the prison wall, "you are a perfectly horrible dog." "Speak firmly and loudly," I heard Charlie saying. "Probably the worst I've ever seen," I said, firmly and loudly. I continued to back up, one hand feeling behind me for the stones of the wall, and once there, I sidled toward the corner some 10 yards away. I pulled the ties at my throat and began to fumble at the brooch fastening my cloak, still telling the wolf firmly and loudly what I thought of him, his ancestors, and his immediate family. The beast seemed interested in the diatribe, tongue lolling in a doggy grin. He was in no hurry. He limped slightly, I could see as he drew nearer, and was thin and mangy. Perhaps he had trouble hunting, and infirmity was what drew him to the prison midden to scavenge. I certainly hoped so. The more infirm, the better. I found my leather gloves in the pocket of my cloak and put them on. Then I wrapped the heavy cloak several times around my right forearm, blessing the weight of the velvet. "They'll go for the throat," Charlie had instructed me, unless their trainer tells them otherwise. "Keep looking him in the eyes. You'll see it when he makes up his mind to jump. That's your moment." I could see a number of things in that wicked yellow orb, including hunger, curiosity, and speculation, but not yet a decision to leap. "You disgusting creature," I told it. "Don't you dare leap at my throat." I had other ideas. I had wrapped the cloak in several loose folds about my right arm, leaving the bulk of it dangling, but providing enough padding, I hoped, to keep the beast's teeth from sinking through. The wolf was thin, but not emaciated. I judged it to weigh perhaps 80 or 90 pounds, less than me, but not enough to give me any great advantage. The leverage was definitely in the animal's favour. 4 legs against 2 gave better balance on the slippery crust of snow. I hoped bracing my back against the wall would help. A certain feeling of emptiness at my back told me I had reached the corner. The wolf was some 20 feet away. This was it. I scraped enough snow from under my feet to give good footing and waited. I didn't even see the wolf leave the ground. I could swear I had been watching its eyes, but if the decision to leap had registered there, it had been followed by action too swiftly to note. It was instinct, not thought, that raised my arm as a whitish-grey blur hurtled toward me. The teeth sank into the padding with a force that bruised my arm. It was heavier than I thought. I was unprepared for the weight, and my arm sagged. I had planned to try to throw the beast against the wall, perhaps stunning it. Instead, I heaved myself at the wall, squashing the wolf between the stone blocks and my hip. I struggled to wrap the loose cloak around it. Claws shredded my skirt and scraped my thigh. I drove a knee viciously into its chest, eliciting a strangled yelp. Only then did I realize that the odd growling whimpers were coming from me, and not the wolf. Strangely enough, I wasn't at all frightened now, though I had been terrified watching the wolf stalk me. There was room in my mind for only one thought. I would kill this animal, or it would kill me. Therefore, I was going to kill it. There comes a turning point in intense physical struggle where one abandons oneself to a profligate usage of strength and bodily resource, ignoring the costs until the struggle is over. Women find this point in childbirth, men in battle. Past that certain point, you lose all fear of pain or injury. Life becomes very simple at that point. You will do what you are trying to do or die in the attempt, and it doesn't really matter much which. I had seen this sort of struggle during my training on the wards, but never had I experienced it before. Now all my concentration was focused on the jaws locked around my forearm and the writhing demon tearing at my body. I managed to bang the beast's head against the wall, but not hard enough to do much good. I was growing tired rapidly. Had the wolf been in good condition, I would have had no chance. I hadn't much now, but took what there was. I fell on the animal, pinning it under me, and knocking the wind from it in a gust of carrion breath. It recovered almost immediately, and began squirming beneath me, but the second's relaxation enabled me to get it off my arm. One hand clamped under its wet muzzle. By forcing my fingers back into the corners of its mouth, I managed to keep them out from between the scissoring carnassial teeth. Saliva drizzled down my arm. I was lying flat on top of the wolf. The corner of the prison wall was perhaps 18 inches ahead of me. Somehow I must get there without releasing the fury that heaved and squirmed under me. Scrabbling with my feet, pressing down with all my might, I pushed myself forward inch by inch, constantly straining to keep the fangs from my throat. It cannot have taken more than a few minutes to move those 18 inches, but it seemed I had lain there most of my life, locked in battle with this beast, whose hind claws raked my legs, seeking a good ripping purchase in my belly. At last I could see around the corner. The blunt angle of stone was directly in front of my face. Now was the tricky part. I must maneuver the wolf's body to allow me to get both hands under the muzzle. I would never be able to exert the necessary force with one. I rolled abruptly away, and the wolf slithered at once into the small, clear space between my body and the wall. Before it could rise to its feet, I brought my knee up as hard as I could. The wolf grunted as my knee drove into its side, pinning it, however fleetingly, against the wall. I had both hands beneath its jaw now. The fingers of one hand were actually in its mouth. I could feel a crushing sting across my gloved knuckles, but ignored it as I forced the hairy head back and back and back again, using the angle of the wall as a fulcrum for the lever of the beast's body. I thought my arms would break, but this was the only chance. There was no audible noise, but I felt the reverberation through the whole body as the neck snapped. The straining limbs, and the bladder, at once relaxed. The intolerable strain on my arms now released, I dropped, as limp as the dying wolf. I could feel the beast's heart fibrillating beneath my cheek, the only part still capable of a death struggle. The stringy fur stank of ammonia and soggy hair. I wanted to move away, but couldn't. I think I must have slept for a moment, odd as that sounds, cheek pillowed on the corpse. I opened my eyes to see the greenish stone of the prison a few inches in front of my nose. Only the thought of what was transpiring on the other side of that wall got me to my feet. I stumbled down the ditch, cloak dragged over one shoulder, tripping on stones hidden in the snow, banging my shins painfully on half-buried tree branches. Subconsciously, I must have been aware that wolves usually run in packs, because I don't recall being surprised by the howl that wavered out of the forest above and behind me. If I felt anything, it was black rage at what seemed a conspiracy to thwart and delay me. Wearily, I turned to see where the sound had come from. I was in the open, away from the prison by this time. No wall to brace my back against, and no weapon to hand. It had been luck as much as anything that helped me with the first wolf. There wasn't a chance in 1,000 that I could kill another animal bare-handed, and how many more might there be? The pack I had seen feeding in the moonlight in the summer had had at least 10 wolves. I could hear in memory the sounds of their teeth scraping and the crack of breaking bones. The only question now was whether I bothered to fight at all, or whether I would rather just lie down in the snow and give up. That option seemed remarkably attractive, all things considered. Still, Jamie had given up his life and considerably more than that to get me out of the prison. I owed it to him, at least to try. Once more I backed slowly away, moving farther down the ditch. The light was fading. Soon the ravine would be filled with shadow. I doubted that that would help me. The wolves undoubtedly had better night sight than I did. The first of the hunters appeared on the rim of the ditch as the other had. A shaggy figure, standing motionless and alert. It was with something of a shock that I realized 2 more were already in the ravine with me, trotting slowly, almost in step with each other. They were almost the same colour as the snow in the twilight, dirty grey and almost invisible, though they moved with no attempt at concealment. I stopped moving. Flight was clearly useless. Bending, I freed a dead pine branch from the snow. The bark was black with the wet, and rough even through my gloves. I waved the branch around my head and shouted. The animals stopped moving toward me, but didn't retreat. The closest one flattened its ears as though objecting to the noise. "Don't like it," I screeched. "Too bloody bad. Back off, you fucking sod." Scooping up a half-buried rock, I hurled it at the wolf. It missed, but the beast scooted to one side. Encouraged, I began to fling missiles wildly. Rocks, twigs, handfuls of snow, anything I could grab one-handed. I shrieked until my throat was raw with cold air, howling like the wolves themselves. At first, I thought one of my missiles had scored a hit. The nearest wolf yelped and seemed to convulse. The second arrow passed within a foot of me, and I caught the tiny blur of motion before it thudded home in the chest of the second wolf. That animal died where it stood. The first, struck less vitally, kicked and struggled in the snow, no more than a heaving lump in the growing dusk. I stood stupidly staring at it for some time, then looked up by instinct to the lip of the ravine. The third wolf, wisely choosing discretion, had vanished back into the trees, from whence a shivering howl went up. I was still looking up at the dark trees when a hand clutched my elbow. I whirled with a gasp to find myself looking up into the face of a stranger. Narrow-jawed and with a weak chin ill-disguised by a scabby beard, he was a stranger indeed, but his plaid and his dirk marked him as Scot. "Help," I said, and fell forward into his arms.